G'day gang, I've got a wonderful Holden Cruise here with me today. It suffers one of its curses, that one of its many problems, and a lot of people look in there and they say, oh, it's got blown head gasket. You can see that. Blown head gasket, but okay. You can see we've got stuff on it. What do you think? What do you reckon? What do you reckon that is? Dipstick out. What do you think? Yeah, so do I. And what happens is, there's my torch. Down here where that oil filter housing is an oil cooler. And it's the seals in behind the oil cooler that fail. So we're going to replace that one today. We're also going to have to flush out all the oil out of this bottle here and the rest of the engine and so forth. So it'll get an oil change and some new coolant. So this has only got 100,000 kilometres on it, by the way. It's a common fault that these things just pack it up so early with that cooler. Anyway, we'll get it underway. Let's start by putting it up, drop the oil out of it, and we'll start pulling it apart. So while I'm under it, I've dropped the oil out. The reason I dropped the oil is because I've got to remove the dipstick. Look, maybe I can use that as a... There you go. So once you pull the dipstick out, you're just going to go oil coming out everywhere. So I'm going to unbolt the flange here. We've got to take the manifold off, as you can probably imagine. So we're back on the ground. Torx bolts, you're going to need a selection of Torx bits. They're not all Torx, but first step, we'll take this dipstick out. We'll take the oxygen sensor out, unplug it over here, take it out of there, and then we can take the this bracket will come off, and then we can remove the shield. If you haven't got a proper socket for the oxygen sensor, you can just use a good old crow's foot. That's what I choose to use, because I've got them. And once you crack the loose, you can just wind them out with your fingers. Well, you should be able to. They're never tight. Not once you crack them loose, I mean. So once you've got that undone, it's a bit tight between this air conditioning pipe and stuff, so you've got to kind of like that. It goes in easy enough, so don't worry about that. Okay, bunch of bolts here, and there it is. The dreaded oil cooler. It's a couple of bolts here. That one there, it just pulls out. A couple of bolts. Just pushes into here. We'll get new rubbers for those. We're getting a whole housing though. And then we've got a couple of bolts up here that we've got to undo for this pipe. And I think there's 5 if I remember correctly, Torx bolts. We undo that and the whole thing falls out in their hand. So next step, I'm just going to pull this radiator hose off here and let a lot of the water and whatever out of it. I haven't flushed it yet because it's pointless running it with a flush in it, because of course it's just going to take on more oil. So I'll flush it after I put it back together. Anyway, so I'm going to dump some coolant out of it, and then we'll get the roll butt undone. Just remember I said there's 5 bolts here. There's a hidden one under the bottom there. That's the 5th one. You won't see it from here, obviously. And yeah, won't be long. And out we come. So it's in behind here. You can buy a kit of rings for here, but if any of this is all warped or distorted or rusted out or anything like that, you bug it. So you might as well buy a new one. It's 300 odd bucks. You get all the new bits and you also get a new filter. That's all the bolts. It wasn't many bolts. Pretty simple job. So there's our new one. There's the part number. And yes, it is. As is most things. There's our seals. These are for these pipes. Here is our here's our cooler. Give me a second, I'll get that out. So, as you can see, they come with bolts, and they have a self-centering rubber on them. So sometimes they don't stay in the hole, but they're just locating. We have to take this one out later because that's where one of those pipes go. There's a bolt goes through that. Not this bit. That goes in there, and the bolt will go over the top of that. So now I'll just go and clean it all up. As you see, it's got all new things, and it's a brand new one, even though it's Chinese. So next I've laid out the seals where they go on these parts. I've got to put this piece onto this piece before we can put this piece into that piece. So the rest part of all attached with the omission of that bolt there. That's the one that holds this one into position. Now I want to push it into the engine like that, see? It's gone all the way home now. Sticking out. And now we can do up this final bolt down there. So everything's going okay. You put your bolts back in here. You put your bolts back in here. You're in there, and everything's attached. And you've got no leftovers to this point. Now we're going to stick the manifold back on. We're going to use the same old gasket. There's no big deal. That won't leak. So we've got all the manifold bolts all attached. It's going to go underneath now and hook up the flange. And there's 2 little bolts that go up underneath that help support the manifold because it has got the catalytic converter in the manifold. And that's what that big blob is, if you're wondering. Yeah, that big lump there, catalytic converter. Bit of metal something there. There's two bolts up here. Don't forget to put them in. You can see them. There's one there and one there. Don't forget to put them in. We're going to do that now. Put the manifold back up. We'll put the flange back up. Pretty simple. Drop it back down and continue. So I'll put some of that stuff in it and let it do what it says it's supposed to do here for the time it says to do it, and drain her out and put some clean coolant. It's had the red stuff in, the red death we call it. We're going to put some nice green stuff in. So I've got my pair of rings over here. He's going to pull the cover off and we'll have a look at how exactly where it fails. Might need a screwdriver, mate. This is where the transfer happens. I see oil, that's the coolant. That's what happens. It transfers across this here, and we end up with oil in the coolant. Like I said, you can buy these gaskets, but if this is distorted or rotted away, corroded, because it does happen, you just buy a whole new thing. So that's what goes wrong with it. Got some green in there now. No more red death. No more oil. Went through a few cycles. Test drive time. That was a good one. Check you later. Have yourselves a goodie. And yeah.